Hold on tight for the next hour. You're entering into a place, a zone called the alternative to the alternative media. It's a place, a special place where even truth seekers fear to tread.
All right, people, let's move like we've got a purpose.
Affirmative.
Okay, hey, welcome back to the Investigative Journal on this Monday. We got a lot to cover. This is Greg Anthony from the Investigative Journal. So sit tight. We got an hour full of good stuff today. And I've got to touch on this story that's coming out of Hollywood. And let me preface it by saying that, you know, when you start talking about these pedophiles and putting a pedophile tag on a person, there has to be exact proof, right? And so these guys in Hollywood will put out movies with symbols and signs, will put out tweets, and we also have all this information, remember in the past, coming out on Pizzagate and all these high-level politicians involved with these high-level Hollywood people creating this kind of world of the new normal they want us to believe, that, you know, sexual depravity, child pornography, all the things that, you know, in the past were considered by most Christians and most people in America as, you know, sick and basically something that is a part of a underworld, a small underworld. But now what's happening is that this new normal they want us to believe has come to a point where they're using social media not only to play with you, but to also tell you maybe this is what they're really doing. And I use the word maybe because I'm trying to be fair here, because I don't like labeling somebody a pedophile without hard evidence. But you can't ignore some of the things that are put in movies. You can't ignore, for example, this Pizzagate allegation. Why did John Podesta, and you got to look at these guys, John Podesta, big wig in the Clinton administration, why didn't he respond to any of this? Why didn't he file, defamation lawsuits? Then there's this big rift now coming out of Hollywood where Tom Hanks, Stephen Spielberg, and all these people are being called pedophiles. Why aren't they suing? Why aren't they responding? Well, the first reaction is that they're going to put it in the category of the tabloid media. This is crazy. And you know what? 90% of people who go watch Tom Hanks remember him in the movie Big, remember him in, as this wholesome guy that came out of Hollywood. And he always had this kind of Midwestern flavor to him, right? I called him to task not on this pedophile issue, but on a movie he made called Angels and Demons. And the movie basically was regarding the Illuminati taking over the Vatican, a book written by Dan Brown, who we know is a, high-level, might as well call him a Jesuit writer in disguise. And this movie, directed by his buddy, what the hell's his name? He used to be, remember on the Andy Griffith Show? God, what's happening? I can't remember his name, but you know who I'm talking about. Ron Howard. There you go, Greg. Wake up. Maybe, is that the early sign of Alzheimer's disease? You can't remember. Well, no, they say you can't remember what you did yesterday. Well, I can't either. Well, anyway, Ron Howard, Tom Hanks, put together this movie, Angels and Demons, and when you look at the movie, you start saying, boy, the Illuminati is going to take over the good Vatican, and there's these evil people in the Vatican, and the good will outweigh the bad, etc. But the problem with the movie is that the Vatican is evil, and it miscategorized the Vatican is the Illuminati. So really, you knew they're in the pocket of the Jesuits if you have any research skills that pinpoints what we talk about in this show regarding the Jesuit Vatican-led New World Order, and their sacred goal is a one-world government, a one-world religion under total control of Lucifer. They love demonic and satanic things. And so when Hanks and Howard were involved in this movie, these guys are mega rich, right? They were spotted in Rome going into, well, the whole thing was shot there, but you know that this movie was the modern day Bing Crosby movies regarding the Vatican, right? The modern day Vatican depicted as now being infiltrated by this evil Illuminati. And in the past, they'd used Bing Crosby. This was after World War II. You know, movies like remember all those great, he was this priest that did all these things that's so great in the community. The Bells of St. Mary's, stuff like that. To give this image of the Vatican is good. Well, it isn't. And once you understand what they're really about at the top levels, you start questioning Tom Hanks and Ron Howard. I think that's legitimate. Why would you do a movie that isn't really telling the truth? And it's swaying minds to believe the wrong things. Now, the point I'm trying to make is, how come there's never a movie depicting the real story that we talk about on this show, which should be out on the table just like the other story, because there's a lot of factual evidence that the Vatican-led New World Order and the Jesuits are behind a lot of these intrigues we talk about. And people say, Greg, you're crazy. They're just priests. Well, when you start looking at what's going on, look at all the information. There's a June 18 tweet by Tom Hanks, which is very disturbing, say, some of these researchers. And a lot of this information is coming out depicting these guys as pedophiles, but they're not responding. Very interesting. And some people have an idea why they're not. I assume that on the surface they're going to basically say that this is tabloid nonsense. But you can't get away from all these images in their movies. And if you go back to Tom Hanks' movie Big, you're going to see a lot of, where they came out with this Pizzagate image, Pizzagate, if you know what Pizzagate's all about, pedophile rings in Washington, D.C., and all of these, what do they call them, these blood dinners they have, and all this kind of stuff. So look at Pizzagate, but a lot of this imagery you'll see in the movie Big, according to some of these people looking at these movies and Tom Hanks. Now, you know Hanks is a member of the Vatican-led New World Order. Now, what he does in his spare time, you cannot prove, and instead of saying, Tom, you're a pedophile, the question I ask is, Tom, why did you sell out to the Vatican? Because that movie you made was really distorted. That's all I care about, really. What he does in his spare time. One, we're never going to get to the top of the pyramid when you talk about pedophiles. We know Hollywood is full of depravity. We know that. We know that you're going to see a lot of signs and symbols in Disney movies that are disturbing. You're going to see a lot of signs and symbols in movies like Back to the Future that are disturbing, that really predict certain things. The 9/11, for example, predicted in the late 80s. Then you've got The Simpsons predicting a lot of the new presidents we have, like selected presidents like Trump. So we know there's something going on here that's not right. But when we get to the real issue of pedophile rings, I think you got to look at some of the things that we did on this show years ago with a couple police investigators who were trying to get to the top of the echelon here. And that means Cardinal Spellman in Washington, as well as top levels of the White House back then. It hasn't changed. And what these investigators told me was that never will we get to the top. They'll throw out a low-level pedophile just to keep everybody happy. But once you start getting to the top levels, the FBI, DOJ is protecting these people. And what you're seeing in Washington now is interesting, too, because this whole idea of Trump collusion with Russia and the way that the DOJ and the FBI treat Clinton crimes compared to none by Trump, supposedly, you're seeing why the New World Order is dismantling any kind of trust in our system, in our FBI, DOJ. They're letting you know what they're really all about. And this, to me, is a sign of the coming end, of a new change that they want. And to bring about this New World Order, they have to have total consent by the people. I don't think it's going to be, forcing people into FEMA camps to say, this is a New World Order. They're going to get people to do it basically consenting to the help that they are going to supposedly give us in the world, because the world's gone to hell in a handbasket in all levels. And, you can't get away from it. Now, let's listen. There's a guy that put out a little video here. I'm going to play some of it regarding this disturbing image of Tom Hanks, this disturbing tweet of Tom Hanks. And let's see what he has to say about this. Okay.
Good morning, brothers and sisters. So, Tom Hanks put out a weird-ass tweet, I believe it was yesterday, and it is driving people in the truth community nuts because it is a boy in an eyes wide shut mask, which seems a bizarre tweet, right? Given the fact that Tom Hanks is, under scrutiny, at least in terms of the truth community, for being a possible pedophile. There's a woman out there saying that Tom Hanks bought her from her dad as a sex slave. And I made a video years ago I talked about that has since been deleted that covered this, and I'll get back into that just a moment. So first you have to understand the official story. What's the official story? Also, I want to talk about why Stephen Spielberg and Tom Hanks and these people aren't responding, and why John Podesta didn't respond to the allegations against him. Because people say, well, why isn't Steven Spielberg or Tom Hanks suing? Well, there's a reason, and it's easily to understand because it's a perspective. And the first part about it is when you wake up, and again, I don't even like that term because waking up would imply that you're now awake, like that you have full consciousness, you're an enlightened person.
Now, my first thought, and I'm going to get back to this in a minute, is when the mainstream reads this, when people, 90% of people who have this image of Tom Hanks as Mr., Forrest Gump, Mr. Midwest, they're going to say, look at these crazy people out there. See what this world's come to? How could Tom do those things? Now, the point is, whether he is or isn't a pedophile isn't important to me. It's the story behind the story and how they put out this information to lead us into this idea that this is the new normal. They're doing it all over the place. What did Governor Jerry Brown of California say about all these raging wildfires, which are, basically weather weaponry being used against us? It's almost like putting us in an inferno, burning us alive. He said that's the new normal. Back to this video.
And what it really is all of a sudden you realize you've been fed a bunch of lies, and now you're going to comb through them and figure out the truth. So it's a process. It isn't like you were asleep and then you woke up. Now you're in a process where you're no longer in a dazed-like state, believing everything the mainstream. You're not believing the official story, but that doesn't mean you're going to find the truth. But anyways, when you have this adjustment, when you go from believing the mainstream official story to seeing that it's all illusion, then you often forget your program. And it's hard for you to understand why your brothers and sisters, your family members, the other people we call sheeple or whatever, don't gravitate or don't have the same reaction when they're given this information. You forget what it was like to be asleep, and you don't understand how other people can be asleep. So this is a huge problem in the truth community. So I want to present both narratives so people can understand this.
Good. Present both. He's going to present both narratives, but I have these crazy thoughts when I'm listening to this, and I got involved in Hollywood back when I lived in Rome, and it was purely to make money because there were a lot of movies coming into Rome, and I was working as a journalist, and journalists don't get paid a lot. So I ended up getting involved in Hollywood in Rome, doing different movies, commercials, things like that. And to put it honestly, there was a point in my life I wanted to come back and get involved deeply, but I never really got to know any of these guys. I was just one of these young guys that was looking to, I'd never been to California, so I come here, and I made some money in Rome doing these commercials and films. So I figured, well, maybe I'll make some money here. And during that period of my life, that was the late 80s, I had really no idea any of this stuff. And the Vatican stuff was just coming into, I was just doing the research on it when I left Rome, learning about it. And this guy's right, it's a process. I didn't wake up one day and say, oh, this is the Vatican-led New World Order. It took a process, and it was a difficult one. One filled with a lot of doubt, one filled with being so angry that I'd been lied to so much by the church that I grew up in and went to Notre Dame High School. I grew up in this Catholic community, and how could this be? How could they be lying to me? So it wasn't easy. So this guy was right on when he says that. Here we go.
So Tom Hanks put this picture up, and it says, music from Joseph Lucy Solari, Peter's Henry to my Kip son, bosom buddies forever. And it says Hanks Spotify. And so what that means is Tom Hanks was in a show called Bosom Buddies, and that was his first real break in Hollywood, right? It was a one-season show. I actually watched a number of episodes where Tom Hanks and Peter Solari, the father of this is an album cover. This is a song called I'm Sorry, which is kind of weird in itself. And Joseph Luca, Peter Solari's son, made a song called I'm Sorry, used a child in a Eyes Wide Shut mask, which is a weird thing. I don't know what to say.
And there's a picture of Bosom Buddies, and you'll see Tom Hanks dressed up as a woman. And I had to think, how come all of these major stars, Dustin Hoffman, you can name all of them, they've always at some time appeared as a woman? I think I know the answer to that, but think about that. Here we go, back to the video.
And so, but to people believing in the mainstream media, that's all this is. Tom Hanks supporting his former cast member. They've obviously been friends for numbers. This is, 20 years ago, 30 years, more than 30 years. And in this show, Tom Hanks and Peter Solari's characters, Kip and whatever the hell he said his other guy's name was, Kip and Henry, couldn't find accommodations, apartments in the apartment they could afford in New York. I think they were aspiring, I don't know. And so they went to live a hotel for women, like some sort of almost sorority. And they had to dress up like girls to get in. And so they were bosom buddies. So they spent the entire season of that show half in drag. And so understanding where we are right now as a culture, as an awoken person, as somebody who is gaining consciousness of the illusion, because now look at what we're talking about in gender and sex being different. And so I've talked about in so many of my videos, all these A-list actors had to put on dresses. And now we see how Hollywood and the people that control our system want us to think about gender and sexuality. That inside of you, there is a multiplicity of possible genders. There's a growing list of genders, and it's separate from your sexual organs. That's what the control of people that run Hollywood have believed for years. And now they're trying to get us all on board with that. And Tom Hanks did this, played this, multi-gendered person, again, because they couldn't find an apartment, so you got to dress in a woman's dress. And so, that was an option. But they have been doing this for years. In so many TV shows, so many movies, you see this, or whatever it might be. Saturday Night Live, they get dudes, A-list actors. The reason that I thought Tom Hanks could possibly be a pedophile, but certainly he's involved in the system, was that a couple of years ago, he went on the Jimmy Kimmel Show and did a bit for him. And Jimmy Kimmel's show is in a Freemasonic lodge. I've covered this so much. The Hollywood Freemasons Lodge has now become a theater, and Jimmy Kimmel shoots his show in that theater. And the stage is an altar, what used to be an altar in a Freemasonic lodge. Okay, so it's connected to the Illuminati, all this stuff. And again, for the mainstream people, that's not, that doesn't mean anything, right? Know anything about Freemasons? This is just crazy conspiracy theory stuff. So Tom Hanks goes on that show and pretends to be a father of a girl that's in toddlers and tiara. She is sexualized, so they take a young girl and dress her like a prostitute. She says things like, he talks to her in a sexual way, which is sexual abuse. Exposing a child before they're ready to sexual concepts and sexualizing them as an adult when they're just a child is sexual abuse.
Sophie Hanks.
When we talked about focus, right? Make daddy love you. Sexy booty. Sexy booty. Get up. There you go. Burn it. I never seen you so
But as they do this, right, there's a laugh track there. There's people laughing, there's an audience that's laughing, there's a laugh track that's laughing, and they're calling this satire. They're saying they are making fun of the toddlers and tiaras. So this girl's an actress, she's not being sexualized, and they're not promoting this type of behavior. In the words that Tom Hanks says, sexy baby, and talk dirty to me, right, which is creepy. That whole stuff is just creepy. So I was creeped out by this personally, but to the asleep masses and the people who control the system, they have plausible deniability, which is its satire. And so this is never going to be considered sexual abuse or inappropriate because it's a joke and they're doing it for comedy. And so that's where you're at. That's where the majority of people are at. So I've talked about this with Tom Hanks. He has been given the good guy narrative. Tom Hanks is considered one of the good guys. So my video featured Tom Hanks and Will Smith. And these are two guys who have been given the good guy, the wholesome family man, the good guy, never a scandal, never acting out, just making quality movies to the masses, right? Making quality entertainment, always playing the good guy role, these people. Ellen DeGeneres is a similar person, given the good guy role. It's not the same level, but just a good person. And this is the brand they have been by the powers that be. This is what they are considered. They're not, acting out in some way like some other Hollywood person. I'm going to rehab, I'm doing drugs, all these things. They're the good guy, right? And that's what you're told. That's what the people, that's what you're told this person is. And so with Stephen Spielberg and Tom Hanks and all these people, what happened with John Podesta, they're never going to acknowledge any accusations or anything that's coming out of what's considered a crazy element. The truth is that this is some crazy element. And the powers that be aren't backing this narrative. So there's a difference between Bill Cosby, who had the good guy narrative. Bill Cosby was considered a clean...
Okay, we got to cut that here because I have to take a break. And we'll come back real quickly here on the Investigative Journal in 3 minutes on FirstAmendmentRadio.com.
The program you are listening to is 100% sponsored by you, the listener, on this First Amendment Rights Media channel. You will notice that there are few commercials on this radio network. There's a good reason for that. Corporate advertising dollars come with strings that limit program content. So without your help, these programs cannot continue on internet or our several affiliates. If you benefit by the educational law programs, we ask you to give. If you are admonished or nurtured by the Bible and ministry programs, we ask you to give. If some voice a cause that you are passionate about, we ask you to give. If you believe in any of these, we ask you to support them as you would a missionary on a continual basis, as if giving a tithe for missionary radio. These programs are not commercially viable and must be supported by those faithful to the cause of truth. Look for the button to sponsor your favorite programs at our listen and schedule pages on the internet. Then, when you subscribe, we will send you the last quarterly MP3 CD of that program immediately, and continue to do so with each new quarter. We will also give you unlimited archive access to all of our programs. We're asking you to give much less than a tithe, so that you may also send support directly to a particular program host, cause, and anywhere else the Spirit may lead you. Do all to the glory of our God and Creator, for His holy nation, the only kingdom that will last forever. Thank you for listening.
Visit crosstheborder.org, C-R-O-S-S, crosstheborder.org, to get your print, EPUB, or PDF version of Nicholas Arthur's new book titled When the Third Temple is Built. That's crosstheborder.org. When it comes to prophecy today, much of the evangelical Christian world has their eyes on Israel, waiting and watching to see when the third temple will begin to be built. The plans are drawn. The Jewish people are eager. Most evangelical Christians today believe that the rapture will happen before the third temple is built. Hi, I'm Michael Eugene. I was taught that Daniel's 70th week was in the future. Is that really what the Bible teaches? Have we searched the Scriptures and found this to be true? Why is it so important for a re-established Israel to build a third temple in Jerusalem? Is it necessary to build a temple on the same location already occupied by the Dome of the Rock? Is it necessary for sacrifices to take place in the temple on Temple Mount? Is there really a rapture followed by 7 years of tribulation? What is the New Testament temple? Can we identify history and prophecy? Who is the first beast in Revelation chapter 13? Who are the 7 kings in Revelation 17? I have asked all these questions, and I have found Nicholas Arthur's new book, When the Third Temple is Built, answers all these questions and more using Scripture to interpret Scripture. The Bible says that no prophecy of Scripture is of any private interpretation. Nicholas shows us in his new book, When the Third Temple is Built, how the Bible interprets prophecy and not man's private interpretation. Visit crosstheborder.org, C-R-O-S-S, crosstheborder.org, to get your print, EPUB, or PDF version of Nicholas Arthur's new book titled When the Third Temple is Built. That's crosstheborder.org.
The following program is labeled dangerous and off limits by the supreme Jesuit command. But stand tall, people. Listen up, and you may just learn something.
Oh, dear Lord Jesus, this ain't happening, man. This can't be happening, man. This isn't happening.
Okay, we're back for the second half hour. I'm going over a video here. You can find it. It's called The Dominoes Fall. And the guy doing it's kind of giving his impression of what's going on in Hollywood regarding some of these A-list actors. And it is interesting when you start looking at all these A-list actors having to dress up as women. But that's the new normal. Right now they're saying basically that you should be able to choose what sex you are. If you feel like a woman and you were born with utensils of a man, that you're a woman, etc., etc. So this is really an idea. It's an occult idea, and it goes deeply into this. If you start studying the occult, into this kind of idea of the two sexes meshing into one. So, which is completely ungodlike, and basically that's why they're doing it. Let's go back. He's talking about Bill Cosby here. And it's interesting because Bill Cosby had that same kind of public image, didn't he? The all-American father. And now look at what's happened.
A good guy, family man. very similar to these guys. He never put out any filthy humor, no swear words. He was family friendly, sweater wearing dude, right? But Bill Cosby all of a sudden fell from grace. And the mainstream media and people started to pay attention to the allegations, just like with, say, Harvey Weinstein, where all of a sudden they flip a switch and they get rid of the good guy narrative. Okay? So they're allowing some other narrative to creep in, but they're not doing that with Stephen Spielberg and Tom Hanks yet. John Podesta never explained his emails, all these people, because as long as the mainstream controlling system and the sheeple believe the narrative that's given to them and is not in any way swayed by any of this circumstantial evidence that they have plausible deniability for, which is that it's like in Tom Hanks' case, it was just a joke, or this might be some crazy one. So he's not going to address any of these allegations. And people in the truth community see a picture like this, and they immediately go nuts. But you have to realize what the official story is. The official story is he's just supporting an old friend's son. And it's his old friend's son happened to pick this weird Eyes Wide Shut mask with the title "I'm sorry" on this way of Tom Hanks apologizing without apologizing. Because this is something they have to do. Sometimes they have to acknowledge stuff without acknowledging it. Okay, in some backhanded way. Or is it some way of provoking a reaction to the conspiracy theorists to make them go nuts, make people look even crazier to everybody else than they are? So there's no way to tell. Okay? John Podesta posted a tweet about pizza, which, drove so many people nuts, right, in the truth community. But you have to guard your emotions, because just because you now see things, and again, you forgot what it was like to be in the days, and all these people who don't have the capacity, the inner fortitude to see what the system really is, right? And now we're being targeted in the rest of it, and they want you to act crazy. And so you have to remember the brand, the shield that he's been given, and the power that someone like Stephen Spielberg has. And some accusations that are, again, this one woman saying these things, but she could be lying, could be a crazy person, not being acknowledged by the mainstream media. And then the other superficial type of evidence that to us is big, to other people it's just deny. It's easy for them to deny, because it's just a show where Tom Hanks used to wear a dress. Just comedians wear dresses. It's funny. See, it's a man wearing a dress. Ha ha ha. Not seeing that when Tom Hanks wore a dress 30 years ago, and 30 years later, we're talking about gender and sex being separate. Okay, so you can easily go crazy. You can easily get emotionally upset by these things. But everybody has to remember how it was when they were programmed, when they were asleep. And so again, acting crazy doesn't help your still asleep friends and relatives. You just stay calm and you say, well, this is the other narrative. This is the other information. Okay, this isn't, it's not a slam dunk. It's not, the kind of information that was available from some of these other things and events. It is, you have to be able to believe in it. You have to understand that there's a controlling system, a whole pattern of behavior, and evil is involved in it. Deviant behaviors are involved in this. You see it with the horror movies, you see it with all these things. A predisposition towards violence and murder and these things in movies. Like, think about all the movies that have murder in it. There's just, they cry about the whole, gun thing, the people in Hollywood, and they put out violent movie after violent movie. And just all these types of things. Dramatic kind of, just cultivating a culture of horror and violence and all the rest of it. And then it's throughout, abuse and all these things, the mistreatment of, look at all the, the children growing up in Hollywood who are sexually abused, all these things. And the drug use and suicide rate and all of it. Hollywood is an evil place. And so when you factor in all these other things, then you say, all right, well, you take like creative arts, whatever it was, there's this building and they represent, it's an agency, Hollywood agency. Tom Hanks is represented by. And they have the as above, so below compass as their building structure. There's a pyramid and an Illuminati eye. There are, multiple places on the campus. And so you say, all right, well, there's more to see here. But for the people that are asleep, you're just crazy. You're looking and finding things like you're doing some sort of weird Illuminati, where's Waldo? Because you're demented. That's what the media is pushing. So not to get emotionally excited, but just calmly present the evidence, explain the narrative. People who are going to get it are going to get it. There's no reason to act in a way that helps to demonize people who have somehow seen above and seen outside of the matrix. All right, this is Paul Romano, definitely reporting for the day.
Okay, so there you have it. That video, by the way, was called "Something is Very Wrong with Tom Hanks" June 18th tweet, if you want to listen to it yourself. And I played it for a reason, not so much like he said, let's look away from the, labeling this man a pedophile, but let's look at how you would have thought about this when you didn't understand or when you were asleep, and how this is a process where you're now realizing there's much more to this. So let's look at some of the symbols that he gave us. We talked about Jimmy Kimmel. The Jimmy Kimmel show, the night show. He's doing it from a Masonic lodge, and there are a lot of Masonic symbols there. We know that Tom Hanks was in Rome doing this movie regarding angels and demons with the Vatican. And then as we talk about things, and if you want to wake up even more, because let's talk about Freemasonry in a sense. Now, I'm pinpointing the importance of not only talking about the occult and all of these symbols they're giving us through, these tweets by Tom Hanks, him dressing up as a woman, blah, 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 and all these Freemasonic occult symbols that are coming out. I'm going a little farther and going, who's really involved in this? And when you take it to the Jesuit Vatican, you start seeing this connection, this satanic connection between spirituality, supposed spirituality, and politics, and you put it all together, and boy, you really start moving the process of waking up into a different realm. And that's what we're doing here. So I see the connections of Hanks and Hollywood, Hanks and the Vatican, and spreading all of this stuff, being what they want is this new depraved normal in almost everything we do. And so, like he said, people that have woken up a bit, that can see this, go crazy when they see the Pizzagate symbols, when they see all this stuff. And like he said, these people don't respond because there's plausible deniability. Oh, it's just a joke. This is what we do. Men dress up as women. Look at Hollywood. Everything's a joke. And so that's why they don't respond. And in a sense, they destroy the truth community by making people who go emotionally off the handle on this out to be crazy. So when I look at it, I think it's important to remain calm, start saying, listen, let's put the narrative that they'll give you on the table, and let's look at what could be if you start connecting all the dots. And that's exactly, I believe, the way to handle it. And the real issue is, where's this all leading? Well, I think it's leading to that sacred one world order, one world religion that the Vatican, as well as the people in Hollywood and all these people working together, are pushing. Okay, so I did say, how far does this really go? And this connection between the Vatican, Jesuits, Hollywood depravity, their push towards, making it normal that all of these sexually depraved things go on. And you're seeing it in all of these Hollywood movies. You're seeing it now come out in social media. But there's another side to this story, and I've done many shows on the Jesuit connection to terrorism through ISIS, understanding that name, why our powers that be, the Vatican-led New World Order and our government, they're all their assets, the CIA as well as many, many other assets that they have, money, military, etc., created ISIS as an enemy, and that the Jesuit priests were involved in this, making sure that, as best as can be, that things go as planned, like rolling that small snowball down a hill, making sure it gathers strength to reach the goal that you want, and that is to have this enemy ISIS bring Islam and Christians to loggerheads here, to fight and fight and fight. And Rome has not changed a bit. It's fun for the Jesuits to watch Muslims killing Muslims, Muslims raping Christians. That's what it's going, even raping Roman Catholics. That's what they love to see. And so, I've done this before, and there's a crazy voice here. I'm going to let the voice, it sounds like a computer-generated voice. But we talked about a Jesuit priest named Paolo dal Oglio. And he should be considered the father of ISIS. And it's a 6-minute clip. And I've done it before, but I think it's good because it makes that connection even deeper, because you're going, okay, so they're telling us in Hollywood all this sexual depravity, but really, I'm strong enough. But what are they really doing with ISIS and this creation of Islam? We've talked about how Rome was instrumental in creating Islam. And that story, again, they'll make it out, people that say that will be made out to be crazy. Really, they'll never sit down and do a real historical debate or study of this, because there's too much evidence that would really put a clog in their New World Order scheme here. Because if you look at the similarities of Islam and Roman Catholicism, it's amazing. So anyway, let's listen to this father of ISIS being a Jesuit priest, and that's going to raise some eyebrows, but I've done it before, and let's do it again just to make a point. Okay.
Father Paolo dal Oglio is an Italian Jesuit priest, lived in Syria. He was called the priest of the revolution, enthusiastically condemning the Syrian government, calling on the United Nations and the West to intervene militarily in support of the Islamist rebels. Dal Oglio was expelled from the country in June 2012 after decades of monastic life in Syria for supporting Islamic rebels against the Syrian government. 6 months after being expelled by the Syrian government in June 2012, Paolo dal Oglio was awarded the Peace Prize of the Italian region of Lombardy. Dal Oglio did not stop his Jesuit intrigue there. He frequently sneaking back into Syria to help the rebels who formed ISIS in April 2013, with Dal Oglio's international aids from Qatar, Saudi Arabia, Turkey, the UK, and the US combined. Three months after ISIS was formed, the Jesuit-controlled media told us that Father Dal Oglio was kidnapped and executed on 29 July 2013 by his own baby ISIS in Syria, 19 days after an interview with Syria deeply. The following are some excerpts from the interview of Pablo Del Aglio by SyriaDeeply.org on July 10, 2013.
You met with militarized extremists who oppose the Assad regime.
Yes. The Syrian state news agency then accused me of being embedded with Islamist extremists and paid by Al-Qaeda.
Your mission has clearly expanded far beyond furthering Islamic Christian understanding.
I am fully engaged in Islamic Christian harmony building, but today I'm also in the service of Islamic harmony building. We want next Ramadan to be a time for prayer and action for the reconciliation between Sunnis and Shiites.
Are the types...
I got to stop there. That's exactly the opposite of what they want to do. They say they want harmony between Islam and Christians, harmony between the Sunnis and the Shiites, but really what they want is death and destruction.
Of causes you've taken up typical of a Jesuit.
The Jesuits are an order of priests committed to the service of the gospel and souls, but not in an artificial way. We are very much for engaging and compromising in the society by fighting for justice, for community development and human development, and for interreligious dialogue and harmony building.
Okay, so we got to take that apart here for a minute and think about when you were in the dark. Think about when you were blind to all of these lies that have been told to you, whether it be in your spiritual life or your political life. You would have believed this hook, line, and sinker. They're an order of priests committed to the service of the gospel and helping people, but not in an artificial way. We want to get out there, engage these people, fight for freedom. Now, we know, now as you wake up, that this guy was a spy. He was basically working to make sure ISIS gets the amount of money and what they need to expand to create this enemy. How did ISIS grow from 500 people to over 30,000 in a miraculously short period of time? Was it a year? Who gave them the money? Who helped do this? What better way than to put a priest in there and say, we're working for justice? And then they fake his kidnapping and death, and he mysteriously comes to life again. You'll hear about that in a second.
Such has been my commitment, and in this time.
You were exiled soon after the massacre of Hola. Was that a turning point in a conflict for you?
Yes, in the sense that it was the moment when my calls to the international community to act in a non-violent way to protect the freedom of the Syrian people in their pacifist protest ended in a failure, where the international community was unable to act. The regime chose to use more and more violent repression until it reached the point of massacre.
At that point, you decided a violent response to this repression was justified?
The moment came when I said people have the right to defend themselves. The soldiers that have left the army so that they won't be forced to shoot their own people, they have the right and the duty to protect the people. And when a democratic civil society is pleading not to be destroyed by violent repression and torture, the international community should help.
Then, as usual, Jesuits controlled the media, putting the blame squarely on Israel and the United States for all the ISIS bloodshed.
Okay, so what happens, the story behind the story here, is that in the last couple of minutes, let me explain it. Dall'Oglio, official word was that he was killed by ISIS, but then miraculously after that, he'd been seen alive. A number of stories came out that he wasn't really killed. And the point is, you don't hear much about that anymore, do you? So they fake people's deaths. They'll do anything. And if you were in that daze, you would believe every word they'd say, right? But now that you don't, I think what you got to do is you got to put, like he said, like I do all the time, I put their official story out there. And then I say, well, this is what we found out. So what really was Dall'Oglio doing? And was he carrying out the orders to make sure that the arms get to ISIS, to make sure that this struggle continues so this enemy could create it? Was it similar to what a priest at Georgetown University did during the Bolshevik Revolution, a Father Edmund Walsh, who brokered a deal supposedly going, he's from Georgetown, the School of Foreign Service now that trains all our diplomats was started by him. He's got a page on Eisenhower's website. But he was sent to the Bolshevik Revolution, and he basically brokered a deal with Western money to make sure that Stalin would be in power, and you know what happened after that. But the official story is that he went over with Catholic aid, with money to help the starving Bolsheviks. And again, put both stories side by side. Think about what you'd believe when you were in the dark, when you were in a daze, and think about the possibilities of what really happened when you've now awoken and you've seen the connection between the Vatican, the Jesuits, our government officials, the CIA, as well as forming terrorist groups, Hollywood, the whole ball of wax. And you begin to see that their plausible deniability begins to break down, and that's why they don't engage in serious discussions about this and why it's hidden. Back tomorrow on the Investigative Journal here on FirstAmendmentRadio.com.
The book of Revelation says, the spirit of prophecy is the testimony of Jesus Christ. This is at the very heart of FirstAmendmentRadio.com. In that spirit, we have created the Prophecy Reality News app for all of your mobile devices, streaming First Amendment Radio 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. Available for your Apple, Android device, and smartphone, absolutely free. Get the Prophecy Reality News app installed today so you can listen to First Amendment Radio wherever you are. The Prophecy.
Since the beginning of time, kings have sought it, nations have fought for it. It has been traded, it has been borrowed, it has been purchased, it has been stolen. There's a reason for it. To secure the blessings of liberty to ourselves and to our posterity. Invest with the security of gold and silver. Call Discount Gold and Silver Trading at 1-800-375-4188 or visit discountgoldandsilvertrading.net. Listen to Financial Survival with your host Melody Cedarstrom right here on FirstAmendmentRadio.com at 4 p.m. Eastern or 1 p.m. Pacific Time. Visit discountgoldandsilvertrading.net or call Discount Gold and Silver Trading at 1-800-375-4188. Toll free 1-800-375-4188.